The Factory Challenge. Chapter 1, First Day, Big Dreams. Daniel woke up early. Today was a big day, his first day at the car factory. He had dreamed of this job for months. Now, it was real. As he walked through the factory gates, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The building was huge. Machines roared, and workers moved quickly. Daniel adjusted his uniform and took a deep breath. "Daniel, right?" said a man with a serious face. "I'm Mr. Lewis, your supervisor. Follow me." Daniel nodded and followed him through the factory. He saw workers assembling cars, welding metal, and moving boxes. The air smelled like oil and metal. "Your job is simple," Mr. Lewis said. "You check the parts and place them on the conveyor belt. Do it fast, but do it right." Daniel nodded again. "I understand." Next to him, a woman smiled. "I'm Maria." "First day?" "Yes," Daniel said. "It's a lot to learn." "You'll get used to it," Maria said. "But be careful. Things go missing around here." Daniel frowned. "Missing?" Maria looked around and lowered her voice. "Some parts disappear. No one talks about it." Daniel wanted to ask more, but Mr. Lewis returned. "No time for chatting. Get to work." Daniel focused. He picked up a part, checked it, and placed it on the belt. Then another. And another. He wanted to do well. But Maria's words stayed in his mind. Missing parts? At the end of his shift, Daniel saw something strange. A box near the storage area was open. It was half empty. But no one was there. Who took the parts? And why? To be continued. Chapter 2, The Missing Parts. Daniel walked into the factory, ready for another day. He liked the smell of metal and oil, the sound of machines working together. But something felt different today. Workers whispered to each other. Some looked worried. Maria, his co-worker, walked up to him. "Did you hear? More parts are missing." "Missing?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "Yes. Important engine parts. Without them, we can't finish the cars." Daniel frowned. Yesterday, everything seemed normal. But now, the factory was in trouble. He looked around. The shelves in the storage area were half empty. Boxes that should be full were open. Who takes the parts? Daniel wondered. Maria crossed her arms. No one knows. Or maybe, someone knows, but they don't talk. Daniel thought about the machines, the cars, the workers. If the factory couldn't build cars, people could lose their jobs. He had to do something. At lunchtime, Daniel sat with Maria in the cafeteria. He saw the supervisor talking to a group of workers. They looked nervous. When Daniel got closer, they stopped talking. The supervisor smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. "Maybe we should ask some questions," Daniel whispered. Maria hesitated. "Be careful. Some people don't like questions." That night, Daniel stayed late. He walked near the storage area. The lights were dim. The air felt heavy. Then he heard something, soft footsteps. Someone was there. He turned the corner quickly. Nothing. But on the floor, he saw something small, a metal bolt. It was the same kind used in the missing parts. Daniel picked it up. His heart beat faster. Someone was taking the parts. But who? And why? To be continued.
Ei, você! Eu sei, eu estou interrompendo seus estudos, mas olha, eu tenho uma lembrança importante para você. Eu vou deixar aqui embaixo na descrição desse vídeo um link com a mensagem 105 palavras mais frequentes para você baixar. Essas palavras são para o idioma inglês, espanhol, japonês, italiano, francês e mandarim. Essas 105 palavras foram cuidadosamente selecionadas para ajudar você a acelerar o seu aprendizado e tornar os seus estudos ainda mais eficientes. São as palavras mais usadas no dia a dia. Baixe agora mesmo e comece a usar essas palavras em suas práticas diárias. Clique no link da descrição, baixe as palavras e continue os seus estudos ainda muito mais motivado.
Chapter 3: A Secret in the Warehouse. Daniel stayed late at the factory. The machines were silent, and most workers had already left. But Maria was still there. "Why are you still here?" Daniel asked. "I saw something strange in the warehouse," Maria whispered. A man was moving boxes. But the boxes were not on the list. Daniel's heart beat faster. Missing parts. Secret boxes. It didn't make sense. "Let's check," he said. They walked slowly to the warehouse. The lights were dim, and the air smelled like oil and metal. Daniel listened. Footsteps. Someone was inside. "Who is that?" Maria whispered. They hid behind a stack of tires. A man in a dark jacket was opening a box. He looked around, then took something from inside and put it in his bag. Daniel leaned forward. The box was full of small, shiny car parts. The missing parts. "We have to tell someone," Maria said. Daniel nodded, but then, crash! A metal tool fell from a shelf behind them. The noise was loud. Too loud. The man turned. He saw them. Daniel felt frozen. Maria grabbed his arm. "Run," she whispered. They ran out of the warehouse and into the factory. Behind them, the man shouted, "Hey! Stop!" Who was he? What was he doing with the parts? And what would he do now that he knew they had seen him? Daniel and Maria had to decide, keep quiet or find the truth. Chapter 4: The Warning. Daniel sat at his workstation, his hands moving quickly as he assembled a car part. The factory was noisy, with machines humming and workers talking. But something felt different today. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out and read the message. "Stop asking questions. This is your last warning." Daniel's heart pounded. Who sent this? Why? He looked around. The workers were busy. Nobody seemed to notice him. He turned to Maria, who was working beside him. "Look at this," he whispered, showing her the message. Maria's eyes widened. "This means someone is watching us." Daniel nodded. But who? Maria glanced at the supervisor's office. Should we tell someone? Daniel hesitated. If they talked to the wrong person, it could be dangerous. Suddenly, a loud noise came from the storage area. A metal crate fell to the floor. Workers turned their heads, but the supervisor quickly told them to get back to work. Maria leaned closer. We need to check that place. Daniel agreed. But before they could move, someone walked past them, Mr. Evans, a senior worker. He had been at the factory for years. His face was serious. He stopped and looked at them. You two should be careful, he said in a low voice. Daniel felt a chill down his spine. Do you know something? Mr. Evans didn't answer. He simply walked away. Maria whispered, We need to find out what's going on. But how? Daniel exhaled. We go tonight. After work. Maria nodded. All right. But we have to be careful. Daniel looked at the storage area again. Something was happening there. But were they ready to face it? Try this. Repeat, you two should be careful. Question, what do you think is happening in the factory? Shadowing, read Daniel's last sentence out loud. We go tonight. After work. Chapter 5, The Truth Revealed. Daniel and Maria stood behind the metal shelves in the warehouse. It was late, and the factory was quiet. The only sound was the distant hum of machines shutting down for the night. Daniel's heart was beating fast. We have to see what he's doing, Maria whispered. They watched as Mr. Lewis, a senior worker, opened a large box. Inside, there were car parts, brand new but hidden. Daniel's eyes widened. Why is he taking the parts? He whispered back. Mr. Lewis looked around, then took out his phone. He made a quick call. Yes, everything is ready. The parts will be out by morning, he said. Maria covered her mouth. He's stealing from the factory, she said softly. Daniel took a deep breath. We have to tell someone. But who? The factory had strict rules. If they accused the wrong person, they could lose their jobs. What if no one believes us? Maria asked. Daniel thought for a moment. We need proof. Suddenly, Mr. Lewis turned. He had heard something. Who's there? He called. Daniel and Maria froze. Their hiding spot was too small. If he came closer, he would see them. Should we run? Maria whispered. Daniel didn't know what to do. His hands were shaking. They had found the truth, but now they were in danger. Mr. Lewis took a step forward. Hello, he said again, walking closer. Daniel held his breath. Maria grabbed his arm. Would they escape, or was it too late? What do you think will happen next? Chapter 6, A Brave Decision. Daniel stood in front of the factory manager's office. His hands were sweaty, and his heart was beating fast. Maria looked at him and whispered, Are you sure about this? He took a deep breath. We have to do the right thing. They knocked on the door. The manager, Mr. Lewis, looked up from his desk. What is it? He asked. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then spoke. We know why the factory is losing parts. Someone is stealing them. Mr. Lewis raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Maria stepped forward. We saw strange activity in the warehouse. Some parts go missing at night. The manager leaned forward. Do you have proof? Daniel showed him a small notebook. I wrote down the missing parts and the dates. It matches the days when the machine stopped working. Mr. Lewis looked at the notes. He frowned. Then, he picked up his phone and made a call. Security, meet me in the warehouse. Now. Daniel and Maria followed him to the storage area. The security guards arrived. They checked the inventory and the camera footage. Then, they found him. Mr. Carter, one of the senior workers, was hiding car parts in a box. He looked nervous. I can explain, he stuttered. The guards took him to the office. Mr. Lewis turned to Daniel and Maria. You two did the right thing. You saved the factory from a big problem. Daniel smiled. He felt proud. Mr. Lewis nodded. Keep working hard, and you'll go far. As they walked back to the factory floor, Maria nudged Daniel. That was scary. Daniel laughed. Yeah. But we did it. What happens next? Will Daniel's career change after this? What would you do in his place?